The needle slipped through silk like a whispered secret, each stitch a prayer I'd been weaving for 6 months. French seams, hand-rolled hems, seed pearls I'd sewn one by one until my fingers bled and my eyes burned. The dress spread across my dining table like captured moonlight, ivory silk charmeuse that had cost me 3 weeks' grocery money, but was worth every sacrifice for Haley's wedding day. Please subscribe to my channel and comment where you're watching from. At 62, my hands weren't as steady as they'd been when I'd sewn my own wedding dress 40 years ago, but they were wiser. Each pleat held decades of muscle memory, every dart shaped by the ghosts of countless alterations I'd done to make ends meet after Toby died. This dress wasn't just fabric and thread, it was my love letter to my only daughter, the child I'd raised alone after her father's heart attack when she was 12. The morning sun painted golden squares across my kitchen floor as I wrapped the gown in acid-free tissue paper, the way my mother had taught me. My reflection in the mirror showed a woman grown thin from worry and lean from years of stretching every dollar. But my eyes held the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Today, Haley would see what her mother's hands had created in the silence of countless nights. The Fairmont Hotel rose before me like a wedding cake of brick and marble. Its valet parking alone cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. Haley had chosen this venue, or rather, her future mother-in-law had. Despite knowing my modest teacher's pension couldn't stretch to such extravagance, I'd offered to help with the flowers, to do something within my means. But Mia Cox had smiled that paper-thin smile of hers and said, "Oh, don't worry about contributing, Bree. We've got everything handled." The bridal suite hummed with expensive chaos. Mia commanded a team of professionals like a general positioning troops, a makeup artist with a kit that cost more than my rent, a hairstylist whose scissors moved with surgical precision, and a photographer whose camera clicked constantly. Haley sat in the center of it all, like a porcelain doll, beautiful and still, while strangers painted and fussed over her. My daughter had always been lovely, but today she looked like someone else entirely, someone polished to a shine that reflected only what others wanted to see. "Mom." Haley's voice carried that particular tone that meant she needed something but was already preparing for disappointment. "You're here. Good. What? We're almost ready for the dress." I lifted the garment bag with the reverence reserved for sacred things. 6 months of evenings after grading papers. 6 months of saving every penny. 6 months of dreaming about the moment my daughter would slip into silk and lace made by her mother's hands. "I brought the dress," I said, my voice softer than I'd intended. Mia looked up from her orchestrations, her gaze settling on my garment bag like a judge weighing evidence. "Oh, the dress you made. How thoughtful." The word fell from her lips like a diplomatic apology for something embarrassing. I began to unzip the bag, my fingers trembling slightly. The silk emerged like water taking shape, and for a moment, the room fell silent. "It's..." Haley began, then stopped. "It's very handmade," Mia finished, stepping closer with the air of someone examining damaged goods. "The detail work is quite rustic." Rustic? 6 months of French seams and hand-embroidered pearls dismissed as rustic. A small door closed inside my chest. "Haley, darling," Mia continued, her voice honeyed with false kindness. "Perhaps we should consider the backup option we discussed. The Vera Wang from the boutique. It's more appropriate for the photographs." "No, isn't it?" Haley's eyes darted between the dress I'd made and the woman who would soon be her mother-in-law. I watched my daughter weigh her choices like a merchant calculating profit and loss, and I saw the exact moment she chose the path that led away from me. "Mom, I think maybe we should go with the other dress. This one is..." She paused, searching for words that wouldn't cut too deep. "It's just not quite right for the venue." The needle-sharp pain of rejection pierced through 23 years of scraped knees I'd bandaged, and nightmares I'd chased away. I folded the dress back into its tissue paper shroud, my movements careful and precise, the way I'd learned to handle disappointment. "Of course," I said. "Whatever makes you happy." I stepped into the hallway to breathe. The thick carpet muffled the sounds of wedding preparation, but I could still hear voices through the door I hadn't quite closed. Thank God you came to your senses. Mia's voice carried clearly. Can you imagine the photographs? Everyone would wonder where on earth that dress came from. Haley laughed, a bright, nervous sound that pierced straight through me. If anyone asks, I'll just say it doesn't fit. It looks like something from a thrift store, anyway. Ow! The words hit like physical blows. 6 months of my life, my love, my hope that I still mattered, reduced to thrift store embarrassment and nervous laughter. I stood in that hotel hallway, dress bag clutched to my chest, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not break. Breaking implied something that could be mended. This was more like evolution, a snake shedding skin it had outgrown. Through the partially open door, I could see Haley stepping into the Vera Wang gown, her face radiant with relief. Mia zipped her up with the satisfaction of someone who had prevented a social disaster. While my own creation lay forgotten on a chair, I walked back into the room. I'm going to take this home, I said, lifting my dress with newfound purpose. Oh, Mom, I'm sorry. Maybe I can wear it to the rehearsal dinner. Haley's voice carried the hollow ring of afterthoughts. No, I said simply. That won't be necessary. I kissed my daughter's forehead, inhaling the scent of expensive hairspray and borrowed perfume that smelled nothing like the child who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Have a beautiful wedding, sweetheart. As I walked down the corridor, I heard Mia say, well, that was easier than I expected. Sometimes people just need to accept reality. The elevator doors closed on my old life. In my arms, wrapped in tissue paper and wounded pride, lay the beginning of something else entirely. Outside, the spring air carried the scent of possibility. I placed the dress carefully in my car's back seat, settling it like precious cargo. The drive home took me past all the familiar landmarks of a life lived in service to others. But today, those places looked different, smaller somehow. My house welcomed me back with its familiar creaks and shadows. I spread the dress across my dining room table, smoothing the silk. The afternoon light caught the pearls it sewn. This was not thrift store work. This was artistry born of love. I made myself a cup of tea, strong enough to wake the dead, and sat looking at the dress. Somewhere across town, Haley was walking down an aisle in borrowed elegance. But here in my quiet house, surrounded by the tools of my craft, I felt the stirring of my own ambition. The phone rang once. Probably Haley, calling from her honeymoon suite, ready to explain and apologize. I let it ring. 3 days passed in merciful silence. No calls, no flowers, no visits. Just me, the dress, and the growing certainty that something fundamental had shifted. I found myself studying the gown with new eyes, seeing it not as rejected love, but as evidence of a skill I'd forgotten I possessed. The hand-rolled hem alone represented 40 hours of work. The bodice construction was couturier-level tailoring. My mother's voice echoed from memory. Brie, you have the hands of an artist. Don't waste them on other people's dreams. Window. On Thursday morning, as I was photographing the dress, the doorbell chimed. Through the peephole, I saw a young woman with dark curls escaping from a messy bun, holding a casserole dish. Mrs. Barnes. Her voice carried a slight accent. I'm Gloria Reed. I live above the bakery on Maple Street. I heard you might need some company. Now and Gloria died. The name conjured a vague memory of a girl who'd worked at the coffee shop where Haley studied. I opened the door. She held out the dish like an offering. Chicken enchiladas, my grandmother's recipe. I figured you might not be cooking much. How did you? Nay. Haley called me, Gloria said simply. 3 nights ago, crying drunk from her hotel room in Cabo. She told me what happened, what she said about the dress. Her dark eyes flashed with indignation. I wanted to drive over there and slap some sense into her. Despite myself, I almost smiled. Come in. I was just making coffee. Gloria stepped into my foyer and stopped dead, her gaze fixed on the dress. Jesus Christ, she whispered, then clapped a hand over her mouth. Sorry, holy. Is that Dithy dress? That's the dress. She approached it like a pilgrim, her fingers hovering inches above the silk. Mrs. Barnes, this is museum quality work. The beadwork alone. How long did this take you? 6 months. 6 months? She turned to me, her expression shifting from admiration to fury. 6 months of your life, and she called it thrift store quality in front of that ice queen mother-in-law. I found myself nodding, surprised by the relief of having someone acknowledge the betrayal. You know what this reminds me of? Gloria continued, circling the dress. That wedding dress Joy Siochi wore. The construction, the attention to detail. This isn't just a dress, it's couture. You know about construction techniques? Gloria's cheeks flushed. I went to fashion school for about a year before my dad got sick. I've been waitressing and doing alterations on the side ever since, but she gestured toward the dress. I've never seen anything like this outside of a museum. Something stirred in my chest, a feeling I'd almost forgotten. Recognition, professional respect, the acknowledgement of skill by someone who understood the craft. Would you like some coffee? I asked. We sat in my kitchen, Gloria's enthusiasm filling the space. She asked detailed questions about my techniques, admired photos of other pieces I'd made, and listened with genuine interest. You know, she said, cradling her coffee mug, my cousin Ella is getting married in 3 months. Her budget is basically non-existent. She's a social worker, and she's been crying for weeks because she can't afford anything decent. That's difficult, I murmured, though I sensed where this was heading. She's about Haley's size, Gloria continued casually. The implication hung between us like a bridge. You think she'd want to wear a rejected dress? I asked. I think she'd cry with gratitude to wear a dress that beautiful, Gloria said firmly. Ella's been looking at polyester disasters online for under $200. This would make her feel like a queen. That afternoon, Gloria brought Ella to see the dress. Elle, my second cousin, walked into my dining room and stopped breathing. Aunt Bree, she whispered, using the family courtesy title. Did you really make this? I did, for Haley's wedding. I watched her face cycle through wonder, recognition, and then a flash of protective anger on my behalf. She didn't wear it. I can't, Ella said, reaching for the silk, then pulling her hand back. This is too beautiful. It belongs in a $50,000 wedding, not a backyard barbecue. Ella, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. This dress was made with love. It was meant to make someone feel beautiful. That someone could be you. Try it on, Gloria nudged her. 20 minutes later, Ella stood in my bedroom mirror, transformed. The dress fit her like it was made for her. The ivory tone warmed her olive skin, the hand-sewn pearls catching the light like stars. Ella's voice cracked. I look like a real bride. You look like yourself, I said. Just elevated. Gloria pulled out her phone. Hold still. I need to document this miracle. The photo she took captured something magical. Ella's radiant smile, the perfect drape of silk, the confidence that transformed her posture. I don't know how to thank you, Ella said, tears making her mascara run. Wear it with joy, I told her. That's thanks enough. But Gloria had other ideas. Actually, she said, I think we should post this photo. People should see what kind of work you do. Gloria. I warned, but she was already typing. Just on my Instagram. I have like 300 followers. What's the harm? She posted the photo with a caption that made my chest tight with pride. When your cousin needs a wedding dress, but can't afford couture, and your friend's mom happens to be a secret master seamstress. This gown was hand-sewn over 6 months by Bree Barnes, a retired teacher who clearly missed her calling. Ella is glowing, and this dress is proof that real artistry exists in the most unexpected places. #handmaticulture, #real artist, #wedding dress, #talented women. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, Gloria's phone was buzzing. People wanted to know where they could commission similar work. By the next morning, the photo had reached 2,000 views. Mrs. Barnes, Gloria said, arriving at my door with coffee and an expression of barely contained excitement. "I think we need to talk about starting a business." I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through comments, feeling like someone had switched on lights in rooms I'd forgotten existed. For decades, I'd sewn for necessity. This felt different. This felt like possibility. "I don't know anything about running a business," I said. "But you know everything about making dresses that make women feel like goddesses," Gloria countered. "That's the hard part. The business stuff we can learn." Through my window, I could see my neighbor walking her dog, the same predictable orbit she'd taken for 15 years. 3 days ago, I'd been following my own predictable orbit. Now, strangers were asking to pay me for skills I'd almost let die in silence. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. Gloria's grin could have powered the block. "I'm suggesting we remind the world that real artists don't always hang in galleries. Sometimes they sit in suburban kitchens, creating magic one stitch at a time." Outside, my neighbor completed her loop and disappeared. But inside my house, surrounded by thread and dreams, I felt the first stirrings of something I hadn't experienced in decades: freedom. Ella's wedding was 3 weeks away when the call came that changed everything. I was in my spare bedroom, now my design studio, sketching, when my phone rang. "Mrs. Barnes? This is Betty Reynolds from Channel 7 News. I saw the photograph of the wedding dress you made, and I'd like to do a feature story." My hand trembled. "I'm sorry, what?" "The photo has been shared over 15,000 times. People are calling you the hidden couture artist of suburban Portland. We'd love to tell your story." 15,000 times. The number felt surreal. I thought of Haley's nervous laughter. It looks like something from a thrift store, and felt a satisfaction so sharp it could have cut silk. I'd need to think about it." "Of course, but Mrs. Barnes, I saw the dress in person yesterday. Ella Reed is my hairstylist. It's museum quality. People should know about work like that." After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my transformed house. In 3 weeks, I'd taken 7 commissions. Gloria had helped me set up a website, calculate pricing, and navigate social media. The phone rang again. "Mom." Haley's voice hit me like cold water. "Hello, Haley." "Mom, I heard about the news interview. I think it's wonderful." "Do you?" "Of course. I always knew you were talented. I was thinking, maybe we could meet for lunch. I have some ideas about how to help you expand this little business." This little business. The phrase landed like a paper cut. "I'm quite busy these days, Haley." "Oh, I know. That's why I thought we could discuss efficiency. Maybe you could use different materials that are more cost-effective. Mark has some insights about scaling artisan businesses." I closed my eyes, seeing with perfect clarity the conversation she'd already had with her husband and mother-in-law. My little sewing hobby was getting attention, which meant it could be useful, but only if properly managed. "What kind of materials?" I asked. "Well, maybe synthetic blends instead of silk, and we could source beading wholesale instead of you hand-sewing everything. Mark says the key to profitability is reducing labor-intensive processes." "Don't sound like that, Mom. I'm trying to help. The dress you made for Ella looked lovely, but let's be honest. You can't spend 6 months on every dress if you want to make real money." Real money. Damn. As opposed to the imaginary money I was apparently making. "Haley," I said carefully, "did you see the news story announcement?" "That's why I called. It's wonderful exposure, but you'll want to be careful how you present yourself. Maybe I could help you prepare." Bang. As if my own words might not be adequate without her guidance. "I'll call you back," I said, and hung up. Gloria arrived an hour later with Thai takeout. "Your daughter called me," she announced. "Wanted to know if I was encouraging you in this sewing venture, and whether I understood the financial realities." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that in 3 weeks you've made more money per hour than I make waitressing. Then I may have mentioned that dismissing museum-quality craftsmanship as a sewing venture showed a fundamental misunderstanding of both art and business." I found myself smiling. How did she take that? She suggested I might be getting above myself and that it would be unfortunate if I encouraged you to make unrealistic career decisions at your age. Cut. My age. 62. Apparently too ancient for new dreams. Gloria, I said suddenly, what did you want to do when you were in fashion school? Her face shifted. I wanted to design clothes for real women, not size or models. Women with curves and stories. She laughed, but it sounded hollow. Naive, right? What if it wasn't naive? What if we didn't just take commissions? What if we actually started a real business? Custom clothing for women who have been ignored by the fashion industry. Nyastjaniyi. Gloria set down her fork. Brie, are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting that maybe a retired teacher and a former fashion student knows something about what real women want to wear. Maybe there's room for something different. The silence stretched between us. We'd need capital, Gloria said finally. Equipment, space, a real business license. I have some savings, I said. And this house, I could take out a home equity loan? Brie, that's your security. No, I said, turning from the window. Haley was my safety net. My pension was my security. This house was my retreat. But none of those things made me safe, did they? Haley threw away 6 months of my love without a second thought. None. Gloria was quiet for a long moment. What would we call it? She asked finally. The business. I thought about Ella's face in the mirror, about the joy of creating something beautiful, about Haley's nervous laughter and Mia's dismissive smile. Threadwork, I said. Custom clothing, by women who understand that every body tells a story worth honoring. Gloria's grin started slow and built like a sunrise. Threadwork, I like it. She pulled out her phone. I'm Googling business license requirements. Gloria, wait. Are we really doing this? No. She looked up, her expression serious. Brie, 3 weeks ago, you were a retired teacher whose daughter treated you like an embarrassing obligation. Today, you're a sought-after artist with a waiting list and a TV interview. Tomorrow, she shrugged. We changed the fashion industry, one custom dress at a time. The next morning, I woke before dawn and padded to my studio, where Ella's dress hung like a promise kept. In the soft light, I could see every stitch, every bead, every choice I'd made. This dress would never hang forgotten. It would be worn by a woman who understood its value. My phone showed 17 new messages from potential clients, 3 calls from reporters, and 1 text from Gloria. Aid found a commercial space downtown. Want to look at it this afternoon. There was also a voicemail from Haley, her voice tight with what she probably thought was concern. Mom, I've been thinking. I really think you should be more cautious. Starting a business at your age. Maybe we should sit down with Mark and make a proper plan. Ryan, I deleted the message without listening to it a second time. The Betty Reynolds interview was Friday. Ella's wedding was Saturday. And somewhere in between, I had to decide if I was Bray Barnes, the retired teacher with a hobby, or Brie Barnes, the artist who'd spent 62 years learning what she was capable of. But as I threaded my machine and began work on a dress for a bride who wanted something that beautiful and personal, I realized the decision had already been made. Haley could keep her safety and her conventional wisdom. I was choosing revolution, one stitch at a time. The Channel 7 interview aired on a Tuesday evening in October, exactly 6 months after Haley's wedding. I watched it from Gloria's apartment above the bakery, surrounded by fabric samples. Look at you, she said, as my televised self explained the difference between machine-sewn and hand-rolled hems. You look like you've been doing interviews your whole life. On screen, I demonstrated the beadwork on Ella's dress. The woman being interviewed looked confident, professional, passionate. She didn't look like someone's discarded mother. Brie Barnes' story is remarkable, Betty's voice narrated. After 37 years of teaching, she's found a second calling creating custom gowns that rival the world's top designers. Her waiting list now extends 8 months, and she's recently partnered with Gloria Reed to launch Threadwork, a boutique specializing in custom clothing for real women's bodies. In real women's bodies. The phrase had been Gloria's suggestion, and hearing it on television made something fierce and proud unfurl in my chest. The segment ended with Ella's wedding footage, the dress flowing like liquid starlight. Gloria's phone started ringing before the credits rolled. Within a week, we had 47 new inquiries, 3 from out-of-state clients, and an email from a documentary filmmaker. More importantly, we had signed the lease on the downtown storefront. Haley called the day after the lease signing. "Mom, I saw the interview. It was very nice." Her voice carried the strain of someone trying to sound supportive. "Mark thinks the exposure might be getting a little out of hand, though. He's concerned about you making promises you can't keep." I was pinning a bodice pattern to silk organza. What promises would those be? Well, the 8-month waiting list, and this partnership with Gloria. Mark did some research. Her business experience is pretty limited. He thinks you might be making decisions too quickly. Mark thinks. As if my son-in-law's opinions carried more weight than my own. "Haley, I've been making decisions for 40 years longer than Mark has been alive." "That's not what I meant. It's just, starting a real business is complicated. Mark could help you understand." "I understand perfectly well," I interrupted. "I understand that Gloria and I have built something beautiful and profitable in 6 months, while you and Mark have spent that same time trying to convince me I'm too old and inexperienced to know what I'm doing." Silence. When Haley spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Mom, I'm trying to look out for you." "By telling me to use synthetic fabrics?" "By suggesting I streamline my process to eliminate everything that makes my work distinctive?" "That's not looking out for me, Haley. That's trying to turn me into someone safer, someone who won't embarrass you by dreaming too big." That's not fair, isn't it?" I set down my pins. "When was the last time you asked about my work without immediately suggesting ways to make it smaller, cheaper, or more conventional? When have you ever expressed pride in what I've accomplished without adding a but or a warning?" Another silence. "The documentary people called me," Haley said finally. "The filmmaker, Marlene Wilson. She wanted to interview family members about your transformation." I told her I wasn't interested. Of course she had. The thought of cameras capturing her dismissal of the dress must have been terrifying. "That's your choice," I said evenly. "Mom, please. Can we meet for coffee? I think we need to talk." I looked around my studio, at the half-finished gowns, the inspiration board, the business cards Gloria had designed. "I'm very busy these days. Perhaps after the holidays." Christmas was 8 weeks away. The suggestion hung between us like a door closing. "Mom, I need to go. I have a fitting at 2. I hung up, feeling the weight of the choice I'd just made. For months I'd been changing. But this felt like the moment I stopped being Haley's mother first and became Bree Barnes, artist and businesswoman who happened to have a daughter. The fitting was for Mrs. Abernathy, a 70-year-old widow who wanted a dress for her grandson's wedding. "I don't want to look like mutton dressed as lamb," she'd said. "But I also don't want to look like I'm attending a funeral." The dress I designed was elegant crepe in deep forest green. When Mrs. Abernathy emerged from the fitting room, she stood before the mirror for a long moment. "Mrs. Barnes," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I look like myself, but the best version of myself." "That's the goal," I said, adjusting the hem. "To honor who you are, not hide it. My daughter-in-law suggested I just buy something online." She smoothed the skirt. "I'm so glad I didn't listen to her." As November deepened, Threadwork's reputation grew. The documentary crew followed us for 2 weeks. Gloria handled the business side with a competence that made me grateful. We hired 2 seamstresses, both women over 50 who'd been told their skills were obsolete. Watching them rediscover their artistry felt like witnessing resurrections. The space became a haven. Women talked about their bodies not as problems to be solved, but as stories to be celebrated. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, a magazine ran a feature called "The Seamstress Who Stole Christmas." The article detailed my journey, but it was the sidebar that made my phone ring for 3 days straight. Under the headline, "The Dress That Started It All," the magazine printed the full story of Haley's wedding, how I'd spent 6 months creating a couture gown, only to have it dismissed as thrift store quality. Social media exploded. #threadwork and #Eladress began trending. Fashion bloggers wrote think pieces. Orders poured in from women who specifically mentioned wanting to support a business that honored their mother's generation. Gloria found me in the studio, tears streaming down my face as I worked. "Bree, what's wrong? This is amazing publicity." "I know," I said, wiping my eyes. "That's not why I'm crying." "Then why?" "Because 37 years ago, when Haley was born, I dreamed of being the kind of mother she'd be proud of. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that she was supposed to be proud of me too." Gloria sat beside me. "You know what I think?" she said finally. "I think you did raise her to be proud of you. But she forgot that pride isn't about having a mother who's convenient. It's about having a mother who's brave enough to become exactly who she's meant to be." Outside our studio windows, Portland's winter rain fell. Inside, I realized that Haley's opinion, once the sun around which my world orbited, had become just one voice among many. And for the first time, it wasn't the loudest. The first snow of December fell on a Thursday, the same day Haley finally came to see what I had built. I spotted her through the large windows of threadwork, standing across the street like a tourist, studying a foreign landmark. She wore the black wool coat I'd given her for Christmas 3 years ago, expensive, safe, and appropriate. For 20 minutes, she stood there while I worked with Mrs. Patterson on a fitting. Both of us pretended not to notice. "Isn't that your daughter out there?" Mrs. Patterson finally asked. "She looks frozen." "Yes," I said, adjusting the hem. "She does." But I didn't move. When Mrs. Patterson left, Haley finally approached. She pushed through the door, her eyes taking in the transformed space. "Mom," her voice was smaller than I remembered. "Haley." She moved through the studio, pausing at the cutting table where I was working on a New Year's Eve gown. She recognized the quality of the construction, the complexity of the beadwork. "It's beautiful," she said finally. "Thank you." "The magazine article." She stopped. I didn't know they were going to write about the wedding dress, about what I said. I continued pinning. "What did you think would happen when you dismissed 6 months of my work as thrift store quality? Did you think it would remain private forever?" I was nervous. Mia was being Mia. I wasn't thinking clearly. "Darn, you were thinking clearly enough to laugh." The words fell between us like dropped pins. Haley flinched. "I've apologized. I called you. I sent flowers." "You sent flowers to yourself," I interrupted, "to make yourself feel better about hurting me. You never once asked how I felt." She moved to the window. "I know you're angry with me." "No." I set down my pins. "I was angry for about a week. Then I realized anger was just another way of making your opinions more important than my reality." What does that mean?" "It means I stopped caring whether you approved of my choices and started caring whether I approved of them." The silence stretched between us. "The documentary comes out next month," Haley said abruptly. "Marlene Wilson called me again. She wanted to include interviews with you and me discussing our reconciliation." "Our what?" Haley's cheeks flushed. "I told her we were working things out, that you'd forgiven me." I stared at my daughter and felt nothing but a vast, calm clarity. "You told a documentary filmmaker that I'd forgiven you without ever asking if that was true? Haven't you forgiven me?" The question hung in the air. "Haley," I said gently, "forgiveness isn't something you get to declare on my behalf." "But you're my mother." "Yes, I am. And for 62 years I believed that meant I had to absorb every hurt and excuse every slight. But mothers are also human beings who deserve respect." "So you're never going to forgive me? I'm supposed to pay for one moment of weakness for the rest of my life." "One moment?" I moved to the gallery wall. "This wasn't one moment, Haley. This was years of treating me like an embarrassment, of dismissing my opinions, of assuming your husband's judgment carried more weight than my experience." "You may see. That's not true. When was the last time you asked my advice about something? When did you last visit me without needing a favor? When have you ever introduced me to your friends as someone you're proud of? Each question landed like a perfectly placed stitch. She stopped. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe it doesn't need to be fixed, I said. Maybe it needs to be accepted as it is. Gloria returned from a lunch meeting, her arms full of fabric samples. She stopped short when she saw Haley. Haley, she said with professional politeness. How nice to see you. Gloria. Haley's voice was stiff. I see business is going well. Better than well. We're expanding to a second location in Seattle next year. I watched Haley process this. Saw her realize that Gloria, the waitress she dismissed, was now my partner in a business worth more than her husband's consulting fees. Congratulations, Haley managed. Thank you. Gloria set down her samples. Bree, the investor loved your portfolio. She wants to feature thread work in her magazine's spring issue about women entrepreneurs over 50. Haley watched this exchange with growing understanding. This wasn't her mother's little sewing project. This was a legitimate business. I should go, she said suddenly. Haley, I stopped her at the door. I want you to understand something. I don't hate you. But I also don't need your approval or your management. So where does that leave us? I considered the question seriously. It leaves us as two adults who happen to be related. If you want more than that, you'll need to earn it. Not through apologies or telling documentary filmmakers we've reconciled. Through actions that show you actually respect the woman I've become. So? Haley's face cycled through emotions. And if I can't do that? Then you can't, but I won't pretend otherwise to make either of us more comfortable. She nodded slowly, tears making her mascara run. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Haley. The door closed behind her. She didn't look back. You okay? Gloria asked quietly. I'm perfect, I said, and meant it. That evening, I sat in my studio apartment above the shop. The walls were covered with sketches, photographs, and a single framed image, Ella, in my wedding dress, radiant with joy. My phone buzzed with a text from Marlene Wilson. iDocumentary premieres February 14th on Netflix. The Seamstress, a story of late-life transformation. Congratulations, Bree. You've created something beautiful. Outside my window, Portland's winter lights sparkled. Somewhere across town, Haley was probably telling Mark about our conversation, seeking validation. But I wasn't her mother anymore, not in the way I had been. I was Bree Barnes, artist and entrepreneur, a woman who'd learned that love without respect was just another word for servitude. In the morning, I would begin work on a wedding dress for a bride who had chosen me because she'd heard the story of the dress that launched a revolution. She wanted something that honored both tradition and transformation, something that would make her feel beautiful while telling the world she was nobody's compromise. I knew exactly what to create for her. After all, I'd been practicing that particular pattern my entire life.